Okay, well, hello everybody. We are here to celebrate 25 years of the Academy's Summer Systematics Institute, which, with the support of the National Science Foundation's REU program and the Academy's Robert T. Wallace Endowment, has been helping undergraduates have museum-based research experiences for 2.5 decades now. And my name is Arya Natarajan. I'm a science communication intern this year, working with Laurel Allen in the SSI class of 2020. And to help tell the SSI story, we have five very special guests here today. I'm going to introduce them in alphabetical order. They are Golden Gate National Park's Conservancy's Lisette Ariano, the Resources Legacy Fund's Jocelyn Garavoy Herbert, artist and scientific illustrator Fiorella De the Nature Conservancy's Alexis Jackson, and Virginia Tech's Josephuetta. So yeah, hi panelists, thank you for being here. Hello. And we'll start off today's program by letting our guests tell us a little bit about themselves. And at the end, we'll return to discussion and questions. So if you, as a viewer, have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section chat thing on the side. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Lisette, would you like to kick us off?
Of course, thank you so much for having me. Hi, I'm Dr. Lisa Ariano. I work at the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, where I run the community science program for the One Tam collaborative. And my project, I was in SSI in the summer of 2009. And I worked with Dr. Bob Drews in the Department of Herpetology, solving this very complicated project, and actually looking at the relationship between two island populations of what's colloquially known as the African house snake. At the time, it was known as Lamprophis lineatus. Now it's Boedon lineatus. Anyway, I'll go into more detail about this later. Needless to say, this project went on for a really long time, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's cool that the project actually went on. Was it like yeah. But yeah, so I'm gonna welcome our next panelist to introduce. This is Jocelyn Garavoy Herbert. You wanna give us a little introduction?
Sure. Hi folks, I'm Jocelyn Garavoy Herbert. I'm a program officer with Resources Legacy Fund. My SSI internship was all the way back in 1998. So getting in the Wayback Machine. I worked with Terry Gosliner and a postdoc, Dr. Angel Valdez, and had the opportunity to describe 5 new species of nudibranchs from Dr. Gosliner's South Africa backlog collection. Just gained a tremendous amount of respect for the detailed level of work that these scientists do, the modern day naturalists, working with the electron microscope, working on all the phylogenetic trees, and just how really detailed that work is. Got a great appreciation for it, and also realized that my passions were a little bit elsewhere in the conservation sphere. Still really fully enjoyed the experience, and it gave me, tremendous, I think, well, not tremendous, but reasonable scientific credibility. And I think, after that, I was able to get work and actually there was a fun story. There was one afternoon shortly after work where I was able to go down to the gift shop at the Academy, and I picked up a book on global marine biodiversity. And I later contacted the editor of that book and secured an internship, which turned into my first real job after college. That was Dr. Elliot Norris, who's head of what's now called Marine Conservation Institute. Anyway, fast forward later, I practiced law and now work in philanthropy and conservation and policy. And so can share more about that. If we want to see more slides, we can. I'm not sure what you guys think.
Yeah,
okay, so we go to the next
we'd love to see. Yeah.
Okay, so then I think I go here. What I'm doing now is I'm working on the Sustainable Hawaii Initiative. I worked for several years in Hawaii before I started at Resources Legacy Fund a decade ago, and then just returned to Hawaii last summer to help advance this governor's initiative, which, as you can see, has 5 major platforms to increase sustainability throughout Hawaii. I'm focused on the marine piece, 30% of nearshore marine areas effectively managed by 2030. So this is part of sort of a global 30 by 30 challenge that y'all may have heard about in Hawaii's sort of leading the charge as far as the US is concerned. And I'm able to apply some experience that I gained while I was back in California for a decade with Resources Legacy Fund, working on the Marine Life Protection Act initiative. Rebecca Johnson knows this work well. There's a wonderful network of marine protected areas offshore California that I had an opportunity to work with philanthropists and state government on. And so, yeah, the work that we do in Hawaii, of course, is very collaborative. It's a lot of planning, a lot of iterative discussions, and a lot of exciting work here to come over the next 10 years. And SSI has been a big part of it.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. We're gonna go ahead and introduce our next panelist now, Fiorella.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Fiorella, and I'm an artist and science illustrator. I aim to create eye-catching and informative visuals that connect viewers with science, nature, and environmental issues. I was an SSI intern in 2005, and I worked with Dr. Rich Moy on sea urchin evolution. It was really cool working with an echinoderm expert, and it was my first taste of working with scientists, and it also introduced me to the field of science illustration, so it really started my path.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Yeah, and that's super cool that you went from science and illustration onto a career in illustration.
Yes.
But yeah,
love it. Thank you.
Yeah, and here's our next panelist. Hi, Alexis.
Hi, happy to be here. So I was a summer systematics intern in 2007. I had always known that I wanted to study marine biology, and I did this the summer before going into my senior year of college. And so it was kind of really important for me to understand what it was that I enjoyed about research, what it was that I didn't, to figure out kind of my next steps in grad school. And so the summer that I was at the Cal Academy, I also worked with Dr. Terry Gasliner on phylogenetics of nudibranchs. And also there was a genetic component the summer before I had spent doing population genetics of species that are found in the Coral Triangle. So it was another summer opportunity for me to kind of hone in on my skills. And so it really launched off where I ended up in grad school. My dissertation focused on conservation genetics of commercially important reef species. And so I'm here with two of the groupers in this picture. One was in the Gulf of California, another was in the Caribbean, and really understanding how genetics can be a tool in conservation to understand population boundaries for fishes and how that can inform management decisions. And so as I finished the end of grad school, I was starting to think about where I wanted to take my career. And I had realized that I really felt I needed to understand how fisheries management worked in order to be a better researcher. And so I made a pivot into the policy realm. I moved to DC. I worked for NOAA Fisheries, and I also worked at another nonprofit really focused on what's the science that goes into these management plans? What are the decisions that we're making? What does it look like to negotiate things like quotas? And so I've kind of stayed in that realm still in my work at the Nature Conservancy. Let me see if I. There we go. So my work largely focuses on fisheries management, both in California and also abroad. So looking at how can we reduce bycatch in our fisheries off the West Coast? How can we use innovative solutions that we build off California to scale those and reduce bycatch in other countries like Chile and Peru? This picture on the right is work we're doing on the swordfish fishery off Chile to tag swordfish and figure out if we can kind of modify gears to understand where they are relative to sensitive species like sea turtles, whales, and dolphins. And on the right, a lot of time is spent in meetings, giving public testimony on important issues. This one was around red abalone and a fishery management plan I'm working on. So really, I feel like this internship kind of like launched the foundation for my scientific career and has given me a lot of context when I'm thinking back on my time then. So really enjoyable.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. And now we have our final panelist. Hi, Joseph. And yeah.
All right. Hi. Thank you for having me. So my name is Josephuetta, and I am a professor at Virginia Tech. I was an SSI intern in 2005, the same year as Fiorella, with Professor Bob Drews, or Dr. Bob Drews. And I was coming from a small liberal arts school in Oregon. A few years previously, I had been passing out anti-evolution literature. And here I was actually building phylogenies of what I had always been really interested in, which were frogs and toads and amphibians and herps in general. So we were looking at these little frogs from Sao Tome and Principe. I eventually got to go on these expeditions with the Academy in 2006 and 2008, collected some of the snakes that Lisette worked on, I think, and got to describe a new species of frog. And this was really exciting for me. Here's a picture of the frog. They look really big in this slide, but they're not. The males are about 1 centimeter long, and the females are maybe 2 centimeters long at their biggest. But we got to name it after a saying on the islands, leve leve, which kind of is like the easy, easy, take it easy. It's kind of the motto of the islands. So it was a lot of fun to go there. And it was really this love of fieldwork and love of the organisms that got me into biology, set me on my path. I went on to my PhD after graduating in 2006. Actually, my graduation, I went to Sao Tome instead of going to my graduation. So that was a good choice. But I went to Oregon State University for my PhD, and I thought I was going to work on salamanders and salamander courtship in the lab of Steve Arnold and Lynn Hauk. I ended up working on garter snake evolution, driving around the West, looking at evolution of this complex species of garter snakes. But it was really there that I started really getting interested in the theory of evolution, computational biology, statistical modeling, and really how evolution actually works. I taught myself R, programming, skills that are becoming more and more common in biology. Ended up getting interested in this theory, and that kind of set me on this path that really started with SSI, which was how do we use evolutionary relationships to understand how biodiversity on Earth has evolved. And so that led me to kind of, again, revisit this question of how do you go from these microevolutionary processes to what we see across the entire tree of life. Right now, I am a professor at Virginia Tech. I have my own lab, and these are the sorts of questions that we look at, how we connect micro and macroevolution. A lot of people in my lab and I work on building tools, models, software, and bringing together data sets that allow us to ask these questions. How does things evolve across the tree of life? And it's really fun because I get to work on a lot of different organisms, ranging from birds to honeybee or bees of various types, salamanders again, just basically everything, and published on cyanobacteria. So it's really fun to kind of be spread across all those different organisms. And they're all united by just asking questions about how we study evolution on the tree of life.
Yeah. Oh, that's so awesome. I love that you started with frogs and like ended up in, literally just looking at everything and anything and how they relate. That's awesome. But yeah, and so now I'd actually like to welcome back all of our panelists for some discussion and questions. And yeah, thank you again for all being here. But yeah, so first, before I launch into questions, actually, we have Academy Curator Dr. Brian Fisher saying thanks to Lisette, and for IDing his observations, shout out iNaturalist. And Dr. Bob Drew says hi to Lizzie and Giuseppe. So some prime embarrassment for all of you. I love that.
Hi, Bob.
But yeah, let's hop into our first question. And I'd love to hear from all of you on this first one. And it is, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think about your SSI experience, whether it's like a piece of insight or weird animal that you saw while you were, working on your projects or anything like that? And maybe we can go in alphabetical order again.
Sounds good. Gosh, when I think about SSI, I think about, working on the cobra cheetah, aka Boodon species, thank you, Joseph, for collecting them, has taught me about patience. I actually, along with Luis Serical, from who's at the Museo de Historia Natural de Ciencia in the Universidad do Porto in Portugal, I actually just submitted my work for publication in May of this year.
Wow.
A full 11 years after being an SSI student. And I think this project, more than anything, I learned bench skills. I learned about, have a deeper understanding of systematics and taxonomy, but it made me comfortable with things that take a long time. I had a friend's mother once when I was in grad school, kind of going through like my existential conflict at the time, being like, every flower blooms at its own time. And this project has really been that. This project, the taxonomy of these snakes, and the systematics of these snakes are really complicated in the mainland. And while, it's taken us a long time to be able to have the material, like the physical material to tell the story of these snakes. So for years, I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in Cupertino. And so I would go and visit my parents, and I was also on a cycling team in San Francisco. I went to school in Santa Barbara. And so I was like, during undergrad, I was just kind of like nomadic along the coast. And so every time I found myself north, I'd be like, hey, Bob, any more tissues? And I'd just go in and sequence them and amplify them, usually on Thursdays. So I could go to nightlife, and then I would work, I'd go grab a beer during my PCRs and not go back and finish my work. But yeah, this project has taken a long time. At some point, I think I had to say to Bob, it's like, I think I'm like, I've hit the limits of my knowledge. And that's when Luis came along. He was a visiting researcher at the Academy for a while. And yeah, it's made me appreciate collaborative work, the work of people before me, and made me really keenly aware that small mistakes can amplify over time. So part of what's made this taxonomic revision so challenging is that, you go back, Luis, and I did it a little bit, but Luis did it really deeply, went back into the literature, and we were finding that people had been mislabeling specimens like in the mid-1800s. I remember one time getting a shipment of snakes from Paris, and I opened up the jar and I'm like, these are 5 different types of snakes. And I think I just screamed quietly. It was supposed to be like one type, and I'm like, these are 5 types, and this is considered anyway. It was very messy. So yeah, I think when I think about my experience at SSI, I think patience.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Patience and perseverance. Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's a great story. Yeah, let's go ahead and move down our list. I believe Jocelyn is next.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, memories, it's snapshots now. We're going back 20 years, but I have a memory of being in the electron microscopy room with Angel Valdez, a postdoc I was working with, trying to get the radulae of the nudibranchs to show up, right? I see Alexis smiling, right? And then getting those pictures and having him, really, and there was something fascinating about, he said to me during the whole experience, he said at some point toward the end, he said, you're doing a really good job. He's like, but I can tell you're not going to stay in this field. And I thought, really, how can you tell? It was very interesting, but he was right. We published together. And I also remember in terms of the perseverance, the patience, the hard work that it all took, being at a summer barbecue. I also grew up in the Bay Area, in the North Bay, and, all my friends from high school were back together, hanging out, barbecuing, whatever. And I was like, I'll stop by for a piece of chicken, and then I got to go because I am working on this manuscript, right? And I have a deadline, and, I'll see you all later. And that was, of course, not the last time that happened after, studying for bar exams in 2 states and, a varied career with science and law and policy and philanthropy. There's plenty of times now where I got to pack it up early and get back to work. But that was one of the first times that I remember, my career is requiring a higher level of dedication consistently from me, even at times when other people are playing. And so, I credit the Institute with that. I also feel incredibly grateful that I had the opportunity to go as deep in as I did, even though apparently it was evident that I was not going to be the next Terry Gothliner, you know, so it was a wonderful experience. I do so value the breadth that it gives me when I worked on so much on the law and policy and philanthropy side, to have this personal understanding of what the scientists are really doing in the trenches. You know, it's incredibly valuable, because of course a lot of what philanthropy does is support science, and what is the role of science in all of this. And you know, the two are so intimately connected. You can't make good rules and good policy without a solid understanding of the science. So I appreciate the way that I just had a chance to be part of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'm seeing a common thread with all of you, actually, with, you know, like science not happening in a vacuum. It's like it's happening in the context of so many other things. So that's amazing that it, you know, SSI put you on this path, even though it wasn't the like final one necessarily. But yeah, cool. And Fiorella, I think you're next in alphabetical order.
Sure. Yeah, gosh, I feel like it was so long ago for me too. But I do really remember at the time, I don't know if this is still the case, there was one science illustrator on the SSI team that year. And I remember at the very end, when we were doing our final presentations, she had her art up in front of everyone, and it was supposed to be a beautiful piece on a nudibranch, but it was actually, I think, algae or a polyp or something. It wasn't a nudibranch. And one of the scientists pointed it out to her, and she was so embarrassed. I'll never forget that. And it also really kind of foreshadowed how important accuracy is in science illustration, and also double and triple checking things with the scientists to make sure you have the right thing, right? So yeah, that's one of the memories I have from that time.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, and then Alexis, I think you're next on our list.
Yeah. So the summer that I was an intern, we were actually not at the Cal Academy. It was being renovated. So we were at this annex that was over on Howard Street. And so I remember being like, this is different than I thought it would be. You know, going into this, I also grew up in the Bay Area in Oakland, and I live there now. And so I was like, okay, we're kind of at a different vibe. Like, let me sort this out. But I think that I still really enjoyed the summer. And what I took away from it was just like their willingness to let us be independent if we wanted to be. You know, like I had spent the last summer doing genetics work. I knew the techniques, and they really kind of gave me the opportunity to like work in the lab with like next to no supervision, like trusting in the skills. They also were like open to kind of like letting us try new things. I remember I was laughing at the comment about the radula, because I had done dissections before, but never on things so small. And so I remember just being for hours under the dissecting scope, trying to get the buccal bulb out to like pull out the radula and trying not to tear things. And, you know, it certainly wasn't something that I necessarily, you know, after that summer thought, you know, I'm going to go into nudibranchs, but there's something that I see anytime I go scuba diving, and it brings me back to the summer that I was an intern every time.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I mean, yeah, as somebody who's also an SSI intern in a kind of a weird time frame to be an intern somewhere, I understand the, you know, being not at the actual academy all the time, and that, you know, it's kind of strange feeling, but that's such a cool thing. I love the dissection stories. But yeah, Joseph, you want to round us out for this question?
Yeah. So what I really remember is just, you know, it was just a few months, but it was very exciting to be working on the things. And I didn't, you know, if you saw me what I was doing, it didn't look exciting. I was sorting through, you know, Bob plops this pile of tiny little microscopic frogs on my desk and tells me to sort it out what's going on. And, you know, just going through those over the hours, sequencing them, seeing the answer pop out. And it was exciting. You know, there's this new species that, you know, we get to describe. And, you know, that it's still one of my favorite papers to this day, you know, and I don't do that sort of work today, but I just really look fondly at that and how it set me on the path that I'm on, really. So.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Yeah, super cool. Thank you all for sharing. And I have a couple more questions, or a few more questions. And these next few, like whoever wants to can jump in and answer these, or, you know, like it doesn't have to be everybody, but you're all welcome to share. But what role has mentorship played in your careers beyond SSI? And I guess now that you're in more situated in your fields, what are your thoughts on becoming mentors yourselves, and how has that worked out for you? And anybody can feel free to start. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Gosh, it's a big question. So I think for me, I was getting ready for this, maybe go back and think a lot about mentorship and mentors that I have had. And something that is really evident to me here is just there isn't any one path. Everybody's path is so different. And I just keep going back to that whole, every flower blooms in its own time saying. And so right now, in my current capacity, I run a community science program for the One Tam Collaborative. I work with land managers in Marin County centered around Mount Tam, and work for this great nonprofit that's based out of San Francisco. And I came, my PhD was in parasite ecology, so really nothing to do with community science. And I think the reason I landed where I did was because of mentorship. When I was at the College of Creative Studies at UC Santa Barbara, there's two things that I walked away with. One was from one of my mentors, Bruce Tiffany, who just retired, that science is something that people do. Science is a human activity, producing knowledge. And I hate saying producing, but creating knowledge is something that's very human, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And then Armand Cures, who was my main mentor at the time in undergrad, he always had, the way he structured his lab was very non-hierarchical in many ways. And his premise was that everybody had something to learn from everybody else. And so I think those two things really stuck in my mind. And then later on, when I was in college, I spent my last quarter studying abroad in Costa Rica. And I studied with Frank Joyce, who's a well-known and well-loved teacher in the University of California, and with the late Patricia Ortiz. And I think from them, had a broader, more grounded perspective. I think, I think they pushed me really hard to ask myself some deeper questions. And at the time, I didn't appreciate it. But I think it's just a reminder that, whenever I have mentees, to just to ask those difficult questions, because in retrospect, I really appreciate that they were trying to ground me. And I think something that Patricia left me with was, she sent me this wonderful commencement speech by an educator named David Orr. And in it, there's this wonderful quote that's become a guidepost for my career and for the people that I mentor. And the quote is, "The plain fact is that the planet doesn't need more successful people, but it desperately needs more peacemakers, healers, restorers, storytellers, and lovers of every shape and form. It needs people who live well in their places. It needs people of moral courage, willing to join the fight to make the world habitable and humane. And these needs have little to do with success as our culture has defined it." So again, just Patricia and Frank, I think, were really fundamental in helping figure out what my internal core values were. And so I think of being a mentor, that's kind of what you're also trying to help folks figure out for themselves. And then lastly, I think you have to be open to people's path and to the opportunities that come up for them. My PhD advisor, Valerie McKenzie, in the eBio department at CU Boulder, was always very supportive of my different explorations. And her thing was you can have it all, just maybe not at the same time. And yeah,
I feel that.
So meaning it's you should say yes to a lot of things, but sometimes you have to say no to some things in order to say yes to others. So yeah, I think with that, I think it's important to, that's how I landed in community science, is doing a deep examination of my core values and yeah, just having mentors that have allowed me to explore different realms of knowledge and of myself. And I think in my mentorship style, I try to be supportive of wherever it is that my mentees are going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that, figuring out internal core values and letting them point you wherever the path leads. Yeah, I think about how like you all have shared like, oh, I started in SSI and it pushed me into this other career path, or something that's similar but gave foundation. So that's awesome. Does anybody else have any thoughts about mentorship? And yeah, Alexis?
Yeah, so I remember I met one of my kind of primary mentors in the first class I took in undergrad. And it was kind of like a freshman seminar class, and we were doing, it was like studies of the Peabody Museum. So it's like we each got matched with a researcher, and then we had like a research project that we did for the full, maybe we did 2 in the semester. And I ended up working with him for all 4 years in undergrad and doing research. And I think he helped kind of shape my direction. The advice that he gave me at the time as an undergrad was like, every summer, do a different internship. Like, try something new, look at a new topic. You'll find out like what it is that you like about those areas, what you don't like. Like one summer I learned I was like, hate doing work around tides, have to wake up super early. But I loved this question. Or like the next summer I was like, love biodiversity issues and genetics. That summer it's like, it's like, so each you picked up new things. And it set me on a path where it's like, by the time I was a senior, I knew enough to apply to grad school right away, because I was like, okay, I want to work generally on biodiversity and conservation. I want to use genetics. I want to focus on the ocean. You can figure it out in like your first couple of years. And each of those summers, then I had the opportunity to pick up new mentors who I still could kind of like tap on throughout like the rest of my career. And I think what's really cool to see now is like what it looks like to engage with those mentors now that I'm in my actual, like profession. It's like a lot of them, it's like the dynamics are really like friends. We talk a lot about how they're still evolving in their careers and like finding the issues that they're passionate about. And I think a lot about like what I gained from them and what I want to give to the people that I mentor. And I think for me, a lot of it is like helping people find their passions, and then also creating space for like students of color to enter the environmental sciences. Like that is a role that I'm like passionate about and like can create space for. And some of those very internships that I did were focused on like creating those pipelines. So it feels like kind of coming full circle on that issue. So yeah, mentorship is like incredibly important, and it's something that, I hope to continue doing throughout the rest of my career.
Yeah, Lisette, did you?
I just wanted to like plus one on Alexis' point about, representation is so important. At the time when I was an undergrad, where I went to college, like there just wasn't anyone that looked like me or had my background in the faculty. And like that didn't feel good. And so, yeah, I just think it's just really, really important part of mentorship. And I've had mentees that have, just have communicated that means a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel that myself, and I look at my peers and I feel the same exact thing. Thank you both for sharing. Does anybody else have thoughts on mentorship or they'd like to share? Because otherwise I will move on.
I would just like to just use this as a networking opportunity since I haven't met with all these fabulous people before. But the points about creating space for and strengthening the pipeline and creating comfortable spaces for students of color, to enter into the sciences is something that we're actually talking actively about at Resources Legacy Fund. How can our we run many different programs across a whole range of environmental, natural resources and social equity issues. But how can we help to direct philanthropic resources to strengthen that pipeline? So just welcome all of you, reach out to me afterwards, or maybe I can reach out to you if you don't mind, if it doesn't feel like, an incursion on your time, to hear about the ones that have worked well for you and the ones maybe that could use more resources.
I guess I would add to what everyone is saying too, that, I imagined a straight line career path. I had it all figured out sort of thing, and it's not that at all. And I've had great formal mentors, but you never know who your mentors are going to be. And you need mentorship in all aspects of life, and being open to providing that and being that for other people, and also finding those people and recognizing that this is keeping me from achieving what I want to. I need help, right? And finding that mentorship was really important. And I didn't, expect all those mentors to be so important to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, finding mentors in unexpected places and just, keeping an open mind about it is, definitely something I've experienced myself too. And yeah, so we've actually got a question for Fiorella from Mike. Switching gears a little bit here, but what do you find most challenging about communicating science through art? And have you used animation ever to communicate science?
Oh, yes, I have dabbled in animation, and it is one of the most exciting things to watch an illustration come to life and start to move. So I would definitely like to keep doing that and keep getting better at that. Can we go to my slides at all? I think having some visuals would maybe be helpful.
Totally.
So I think as a science illustrator, it's really important so maybe we'll just go through these and can have a little visual treat of what form science illustration can take now. And I think if you're interested in going into science and art, it really has to be something that evolves from what is traditionally thought to be science illustration. So something that's, in textbooks or in scientific papers. For me, it's really about connecting with both scientists and with the general public, connecting with their emotions as well as their minds. So I have found that science illustration can do this very effectively. One thing that I think helps to engage the public is to have it be really eye-catching and simple, so that it's not too hard to understand at the beginning. It can pull someone in, and then when they're ready and they want to learn more, they can read whatever's with it, or they can explore that. Yeah, so this one right here is about fireflies and how diverse fireflies are in this country, the many different species there are. I think people, when they think firefly, they think of one type of insect and just how it looks, but there's so many different forms that they take. And so this is kind of just like a snapshot, really, eye-catching and easy to understand for both scientists and for the public. And then this went to the Xerxes Society. So it went into a brochure about fireflies with text and information for the viewer to learn more. But yeah, I think the hardest thing is really to grab someone's attention quickly and then give information along with the visual.
Yeah. Yes. So these are all fireflies. Man, I'm learning new stuff today. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of these, like the ones on the bottom, they stay in their larval form their whole lives.
Oh, wow.
The one that's devouring a male on the left-hand side, that female mimics the flashing patterns and the scent of females of the guy that's getting eaten species. And so he goes to mate with her, and then she eats him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I especially like the one with these things, the little, those fun little things. Yeah, this is really cool.
The antenna, yeah. Oh, yeah, he has. Yeah, the males use their antenna to pick up pheromones.
Is that a cantharid beetle of some sort?
I'm sorry?
The one with the antennae, is that a beetle?
So they're all
beetles. Yeah.
They're all fireflies. Yeah. Yeah. So they're just they're different species of firefly in the U.S.
I've just seen the one with the little antennae like several times.
Oh, you have?
Yeah. It's I'm really into iNaturalist, so I'm constantly looking for.
Yeah, I believe that's the Douglas fir firefly. Yeah. Or no, maybe I don't remember. The text is gone, so I don't even remember all the names.
Oh yeah, that's super cool. I love that. And yeah, I'm gonna ask another question now. This one is for Joseph from Suzanne. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey from being, like you said, sharing anti-evolution literature to being a, evolutionary biologist and a scientist?
Yeah, it happens very slowly. I always tell people that, when you argue with somebody or you have a difference of opinion and you're arguing, not everybody needs to do that. But it's often said that it's not worth your time or people won't change their minds. And it's true. They'll never change their mind during an argument. Nobody wins an argument, right? But that doesn't mean that you don't plant a seed that lasts for a long time, right? And so changing your mind in something so fundamental takes a very long time. So it happened more with a whimper than a bang, right? It's just kept accepting microevolution, pushing it back. And then I get to the academy and I'm building these trees and I'm like, oh, well, it's clearly the same thing that splits these tiny little frogs that look the same as it splits humans from everything else, and so on and so forth. So, and I think, I probably wouldn't have admitted it a few years ago, but that's definitely what kind of interested me in my current research program of kind of trying to unite micro and macroevolution, is that I felt like I learned so much from great mentors over the years. And I felt like that wasn't communicated as effectively as it could have been to me as a curious but naive high schooler, right? So, I've kind of view that as an important role of the research that I do, is to kind of communicate that more broadly.
Yeah, that's really great. I love what you said about communication too, and how important of a role it actually plays in the research itself, making it meaningful and stuff. So,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an important thing that's happening with science communication right now, with whether it's communicating about pandemic research, about climate change, about evolution. All of these things are so challenging. And I think it's a really interesting question to how to do that most effectively.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing. And so I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next question. And this one is, we kind of talked about it a little bit already, but just like if anybody else wants to jump in with any other thoughts, did SSI influence your choices in defining your career path? And if so, how, and maybe what were some of the defining moments for you? And anybody feel free to jump in at whatever time. Like a moment for buffering.
Go ahead.
After you.
No, I was just going to say, I think I touched a little bit on it before, but it's like, it absolutely was, like one of the stepping stones that led me into academic research was kind of the start of my career. And that ability for us to kind of work independently, to like know what it's like to have an advisor who you aren't necessarily with all the time, and you're checking in with to kind of advance your bodies of work. So yeah, I feel like these kind of internships are just like so important for students to find their paths, whether it's in the direction of their internship or in the other direction, right?
Yeah. I keep hearing, it's just as important to figure out what you don't like. Like, I think some other past SSI interns have also told us that, like, yep, if you hate doing this particular thing, like, just don't do it in the future. Like, yeah, totally. And then Jocelyn, yeah.
Yeah, no, I would just underscore that. I think, I enjoyed my experience and also could tell that it wasn't going to be for me exactly, right? That particular path with science, but it helped me make the steps, right? It's always been a stepwise process of try something and then make a little adjustment, try the next thing. So for me, it was, okay, I'm going to go from pure science to a science advocacy nonprofit. And then I did that. And then, that's where I kind of keyed into, like, there was a lawyer in the room at one of the convenings who was writing up the stuff at the end of the day that the scientists had been, jamming on all day long. And I thought, I'm going to talk to her because she's the one that's capturing all this, and that I like what she's doing. And so, so then I started exploring that route. Practice law, that wasn't really my thing either. And I think that always the sort of larger picture, but you have to take each of those steps. And I just think not only, finding internships and trying things, but also, and this is off the question, but creating your own jobs is just something I really want to make sure to share, since we're, on a time-limited conversation today. I mentioned that story about going to the gift shop and finding that one book, and then just reaching out to the author of it saying, there was no internship advertised, right? I just reached out to the guy, like, you're global marine biodiversity, like, you're the guy. Okay, I want to work with you. I was a little bit more professional than that in my tone, but that helped, right? It caught his attention. He offered me, it started out as an unpaid internship. I scrapped together some other stuff for the summer and proved my worth over a period of 12 weeks or so, at which point I said to him, I'd love to stay on here, but I can't stay on for free, right? So what can we do, right? So, and there are a number of times over the course of my career that I've done that, where I just find the person who I think is doing the thing that is most like the thing I'm interested in, and I kind of force myself into under their wing nicely. And I just think it's a great way to go. So you're not always, looking on whatever it is, LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever, for something like, is this mine? Can I find a job? Can I put myself in a pile of, a bazillion resumes? Like, you can, but it might not work out that well, and it might not have anything to do with you. It's just that those processes aren't necessarily super rewarding, and don't always land on the right candidate necessarily. So that's all. I just want to make sure to share that at some point.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that too, especially like just being able to, it's okay to just reach out to people and talk to them. I know a lot of, especially students of color going into undergrad, or like I have to go through these pipelines, and it's kind of, I've read a lot about different, like it's harder for them to know that it is okay to just reach out to people. So I really appreciate you bringing that up as like, yes, this is an option. Like, it's okay to just talk to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. And yeah, does anybody else have? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just really briefly, could I share my slide? Let's see.
Oh yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get them up in a sec.
Yes, but one thing that I've actually only more recently come to appreciate about the time I spent at SSI is I think I've had that introduction to museum research and collections made me interested in long-term data collection, which is a really big part of my current work. There we go. So my work at the One Tam Collaborative is I work with land managers from these different land management agencies. So in this, so all of these wonderful folks. And, I end up doing collections. Still, they're not with Cal Academy, but, I'm collecting bees, and I'm doing a lot of collections on iNaturalist. And from my experience working on Boedon and looking at what scientists had done in the 1800s, I constantly now find myself thinking, like, how is someone in 2300 going to use my data? Did I leave enough documentation behind? Did I label my stuff correctly? And I think, maybe it drives some of my colleagues a little crazy, but I think it's going to serve the folks in 2300 and 2400 well, I hope.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
I super love that. Yeah, it's so wild thinking about how much it's like the collaborative nature that you were talking about earlier, like how it all connects even over time.
And how important museums are in being the repositories of long-term biodiversity data, and in promoting a lot of these databases that people all over the world use. Yeah.
Oh, that's so awesome. But yeah, and I've got one more question here. And I'd love to hear from all of you on this one. We can go in alphabetical order again. But what do you think that your college self back in the SSI days did really well? And what advice would you give to them to do even better? Kind of, it's like along the lines of mentorship and, career paths and stuff, but if you could like, yeah. And yeah, Lisa, if you want to start.
Okay. All right. Oh gosh. Oh man. I think back about when I was an SSI student, and it was a time of a lot of turmoil and high drama in my life. So I think, can someone else go first? I think I need to think about like what I really need to say about this.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Jocelyn, are you?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's far enough back that there's nothing fresh there for me. So it's I would say, it took me about, I grew up the child of a doctor, right? So I had two options. It was become a doctor or a lawyer. Sadly, I ended up in one of those, but in my own way. I say sadly because the point of what I'm about to say is, listen to your own inner voice about what motivates you, right? That's the part that took me about halfway through college to figure it out. I stayed, on a pre-med track for that first half of college, put myself through some of those grueling courses. And, you know, the idea of healthcare is beautiful, but it's not for me, right? So it took me a couple years to finally kind of crack that open and realize, well, I can actually be interested in whatever I want to be interested in. And what a liberating moment that is, and no better time to do it than while you're in college, right? So if you're having a thought, like, if you keep flipping, well, we used to look through course catalogs in my day, but if you're flipping through whatever you flip through now online, and you're thinking there's something I'm interested in over here, and it doesn't make sense because of my major or because of my whatever, because of my mom or my uncle or what, you know, somebody told me, like, quiet all those other voices, let your own voice come up, and go that way, right? I mean, that's, I think, what I could have done better. And when I finally did start doing that, that's when SSI opened up to me, when my master's in conservation biology opened up to me, and I realized I could go a completely different direction with science in a way that spoke to me, and the little girl that, you know, played in the backyard and looked for salamanders in the creek and did all these other things and couldn't stop tide pooling, you know, that I could make all these things into a career too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I was nodding to a lot of that. I think one of the things that I would say is kind of keep a pulse on what you're good at, right? Like, and like that can build into a career. I think I thought that I wanted to become a professor, right? Like I'd go to grad school, I'd get my PhD, and I'd teach. That was the path that I'd seen from a lot of kind of earlier stage mentors. And I kind of started to realize, I'm like, as much as I love research, and I honestly still wish I could kind of be publishing more now, it's like, I loved going to conferences and meeting people. I loved giving presentations and like paring down what could be very jargony science into like why it mattered. And I had mentors who kind of pushed me to figure out, okay, I'm going to this meeting at the FAO. I can bring some results with me. Like, what am I sharing now, right? Like, why does science matter in this moment? And so I started to realize, like, I like talking and engaging with people and explaining to them why things are important. And it's like a lot of policy work is like, as much as it's about the subject matter, it's about the relationships that you build with like fisheries managers or with the fishermen and with like fellow like other NGOs. And it's like how you kind of like can work collectively to like move an agenda forward. And so I think if I like look back to college and I had stayed on that track, it's like I could have ended up in a place that was very different from what really excites me on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I just pay attention to like what you like to do, what you feel like you're good at, and like let that take you in a variety of directions.
Yeah, totally. Super cool.
I 100% agree with finding what excites you and like having that be the biggest sign of what you're meant to do. And in order to find what excites you, it's good to be curious. So one thing I think I was really good at besides partying in college was being really curious. And I think that's one main thing that artists and scientists share. So yeah, that's my biggest advice.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And yeah, artists and scientists totally share the curiosity. I love that so much. And yeah, Joseph, do you have thoughts that you'd like to share?
Sure. I was terrible at partying in college. I should have done more.
Yes, also that.
I really, I got into biology because I like catching frogs and snakes, right? And I thought that's what I would be doing. And at a certain point, I kind of have a different perspective that, when that became my job, it became stressful and all my anxieties became on the thing that I did for fun, and I still do for fun. And so I kind of decided that was better as the thing I do for fun, and kind of went into this other, track of doing more computational, more modeling. And, so much of my job is not catching frogs and snakes now. But I think, just to echo what other people have said here, the best advice I got along the way was that, being happy at your job is not necessarily being happy every day because it's just so much fun. It can be hard. It's going to be stressful. You may be anxious. I am. But that being happy at your job is putting your best skills, what you think you do well, to problems that you think matter, right? And so if you do that, then you can have this kind of long-lasting satisfaction with your job, even if you go into work and it's everything's on fire. And so that was really great advice for me.
Yeah, that's really, really great.
Sorry there, I had flashbacks for a moment about that summer, and like had like this weird UFO sighting near Napa like that summer, and was just then there was like one evening where I was like driving down to see my parents in Cupertino, and I didn't have any gas, so I had to like stop in San Mateo to like pay with like dimes. Anyway, just like remembering all the madness of that era of my life.
Yeah, San Mateo is my hometown, so shout out Bay Area.
Yeah, just like, you know, things that I'm like, wow, like it's been a while. But yeah, I think when the advice that I have is to not fear things that take a long time. Again, you know, it's started working on Boedon in 2009. We're in review right now in 2020. And to embrace side projects. My SSI project has been like my decade-long side project. You know, it has nothing to do with what my PhD was in, nothing really to do with my current work. And you know, it's I think throughout my career, I've had different side projects, leadership roles in my community, things that didn't seem particularly related to wherever it is that I was going. But I think all of those side projects have been really crucial in learning new skills, meeting new people, and again, just getting to know better what it is that I am good at and that I like. And so I say, embrace your side projects. They are trying to tell you something. And then, yeah, just to, you know, the field of conservation or biology, whatever, you know, however we want to define it, it is competitive and can seem very intimidating. But there are a lot of niches in it. There are a lot of different types of work, and you know, I wish that I had more exposure to the different types of work in this general kind of profession when I was an undergraduate. So again, if you know you heard someone say something that speaks to you, please reach out. You know, also Twitter is like actually a really great place to learn about myriad things that people do. And then just, you know, I think in retrospect, kind of like the opposite of competition is cooperation, right? So leading with cooperation, you know, at some point I remember like after my PhD, learning to be really happy for friends that were competing for the same job that I was going for. And just being like, you know, this is really hard for all of us. And so just like, good luck, you know, like, and just kind of taking that stance like helped me a lot. And again, just a reminder that conservation, like, you know, biodiversity on Earth is under threat. Conservation needs people of all talents. And, you know, I think, you know, and I mean that both in the sense of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also in, you know, the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy. Like, we have an accounting department, we have HR folks, and, you know, there's all kinds of ways that people can contribute to conservation. And yeah, you know, it's just like there's not any one way.
Yeah, totally. I love that, you know, like it's for everybody and comes together.
Yeah, I mean, it really, you know, community science, you know, I work with people from all walks of life, and there is everyone, like, you know, everyone should be involved.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you all so much for sharing. I will definitely be taking all of this advice into account because you know, I definitely need it. But yeah, I think that's what we have time for today's panel. And I just want to take a second to thank this year's program directors, Drs. Lauren Esposito and Rebecca Johnson, for, you know, organizing everything. And another huge thank you to all of you panelists. As like a current SSI student, it's like honestly just incredible to hear, you know, all your stories. And like, I'm sitting here a little bit just like, in like kind of dumbfounded awe, like, wow, you're all just incredible and such cool people. So I'm like, wow, you know, getting to be in a similar trajectory is it's really inspiring to hear from all of you. So thank you for being here. And yeah, with that, I think we will sign off. Thank you to everybody who asked questions. Farewell. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.